Yo and hello my friends, welcome back once again to another awesome episode of the League of Fantasy Legends podcast. I'm your host, Pistons Wish, Chris Benedict. Finally, we have Ferris Biscuit back with us. Biscuit, how are you?
It has been a journey and a struggle, but I think we're finally ready to get back into things. I appreciate everyone sticking with us while I was out. I know you're all here for me. Just kidding. But again, I'm thankful to be back.
Yeah, Biscuit, first he was dealing with a sickness, then computer problems, and then microphone problems. I mean, this is like the fourth time we've tried to record an episode, but we're here, we're doing it, it's going to be awesome.
If you're familiar with like cyberpunk, I got like a cyberpunkish hack and slash setup going on here, so hopefully this turns out not terrible.
Oh gosh. Yeah, if you don't follow us on Twitter, it's at LFL Pod. Join our Discord community. We talk fantasy League of Legends all the time. Some good Worlds discussions going on there. Both of those links you can find in the description of this episode. And if you weren't here last week, you missed an awesome episode. We didn't have Biscuit, but we did have Isak on from the Ego app, who we are partnering with to create content for their Worlds Fantasy Tournament. $10,000 prize. It is not too late to enter, but Biscuit, it probably is too late to win.
Unfortunately, for some of you, but it's still a lot of fun. It's definitely something new. If you're not familiar with something like that, I would highly recommend at least checking it out just to maybe, dip your toes in just to see what it's like, because I'm sure they're going to be having all kinds of competitions come next split. So definitely want to check that out for your chance to win.
Definitely, and we get a very small kickback from your profile creations, so go make one to support our show. We appreciate it so much. We're also throwing up articles on there, on the Ego app. You'll find us linking those on Twitter. We'll probably link them in the Discord as well, but it's just some of our thoughts on, fantasy. I did one on things to watch in the group stage. I just finished one on how to put your lineup together for the group stage. And so definitely check those out. I want to get into recapping the play-in stage of the tournament. How much of those games were you able to watch?
So I caught bits and pieces, from my time in the bathroom, not in the bathroom, watching children, not watching children, try to watch as much as I possibly could, obviously. But it seemed like there was some high level play all throughout the weekend.
Yeah, absolutely. I had it on a little bit at work. I was starting to get made fun of, but I do not care. Looking at the group stage of the play-in stage, the two groups, very different. We look at Group A. We had Fnatic versus EG the very first day. That was the one that, pretty much was going to decide the group. And Fnatic destroyed EG and really kind of destroyed my hopes for them making it out. But EG was not to be denied. Fnatic did win the group. They finished 4-1. They took a loss to Loud Gaming from Brazil in the middle of that stage, which gave EG a chance. All they had to do was beat Detonation Focus Me from Japan, and they could make it through, or at least have a tiebreaker game to make it through against Fnatic. But then they went and lost to DFM. DFM, such a fun team. Evie in the top lane was super fun to watch. But so we saw Fnatic win the group, EG second, Detonation Focus Me, and Loud Gaming played in a best of 5. What did you think from Group A? Was anything stand out from you?
So just taking a look at the stage overall, I feel like Group A was the weaker of the two groups. However, I definitely feel like there was a lot of good play. Like you mentioned, the Fnatic versus Evil Geniuses match was definitely one of the bigger matches of the group, and was a really good one, right? But then you had other teams like, I'm not too familiar with like Loud, and you mentioned like Detonation Focus Me. I had actually picked DFM to come out of the group along with Evil Geniuses, so I really didn't see Fnatic making the move that they did. But at the end of the day, it was a really good play from a lot of these teams, and I'm sure we'll be seeing them in years to come.
Yeah, really impressive, I think, from Fnatic with all the turmoil they had coming into it, especially upset not getting there until pretty much the day of the game and then coming out and just destroying EG. Good stuff from Fnatic and EG too. In Group B went almost exactly according to predictions, with the slight exception of DRX took down RNG also in that first day in a game that was super fun. I think it went like 43 minutes. RNG picked the Nyla for Gala, and the Nyla was completely and totally useless and pretty much through the game. And so I don't know how much of a predictor that'll be for future success, but in round 1 it was Korea over China. Then we saw in the third and fourth spots, it was Mad Lions and the Saigon Buffalo. Mad Lions taking down the Buffalo in their group stage game to be able to finish third, Buffalo fourth. Really went exactly according to plan. Anything specific you want to call out?
Yeah, I mean, like you mentioned, it's not really much of a surprise, I think, here with DRX and RNG finishing 1 and 2. I feel like you mentioned as well, it could have flip-flopped either way with both of those teams coming out, again, 1 and 2. Mad Lions had a good showing. I just like the name Sajuan Buffalo. That seems pretty cool. I think the logo is really sweet. But, I mean, I'm sure, they had a couple good games as well, good showings. I'm sure they maybe caught some of these better teams by surprise. Weren't able to take as many wins, obviously, as they wanted to in order to get into group stages, but I wouldn't be surprised if we see them again as well.
I love the Saigon Buffalo. They're probably my favorite non-NA team. They just, their playstyle is so fun from Vietnam. They pulled out a Zach mid, which is just like the most exciting thing I've ever heard. I actually went and played Zach mid and carried 6 games in a row. So super, super fun. Their Twitter handle is at Mr. Buffalo 7. And so, I mean, that is also fun.
That is the most generic trolling, almost Twitter handle you could have. And it's just fantastic.
Mr. Buffalo. If you remember back, thank Mr. Buffalo from some international tournament years ago. I don't remember why. They must have beat someone to I think it was G2 through. Love the Buffalo. Then going into the best of fives, we saw Loud and DFM play. DFM winning 3-1. We saw Mad Lions playing the Buffalo. They also won 3-1, which brought us to the second day, which was the best of fives to get through to groups. We saw EG play Mad Lions in what was super anticipated, and EG just destroyed them 3-0. It was not close. Not a single game was close. Super exciting for an NA fan to see EG performed so well. And then on the other side, we saw DFM versus RNG. DFM actually taking game 1 and then had a 3K gold lead on a scaling composition in game 2. And then RNG woke up and absolutely wiped them from that point on. Did you take anything from the best of fives from the playing stage? I was kind of bummed because we don't get fantasy points for it in the tournament. And Cowrie was awesome, but any specific points from there?
Yeah, just a couple points here. I mean, like you mentioned, RNG, it seems like DFM might have poked the bear, per se, in that matchup, because obviously RNG woke up after their game 1 loss to take the series in the next 3. Happened. Yeah, and then, I mean, I don't know about you, but I think perhaps the biggest shock, I guess you would call it, for the entire stage was EG just wiping the floor with Mad Lions. I know Jojo P. Young was talking that crap to Nixie before the match had started, saying they're going to beat them and whatnot. And he definitely lived up to that, right? I mean, they came out and they obviously 3-0'd Mad Lions. I would not have anticipated that. I probably honestly would have taken Mad Lions in the series. But perhaps EG can carry that momentum into the next stage and, maybe pull some wins out there.
Yeah, I really hope so. Now I think they're in the group of death. But other than that, I also agree. I really hope that they will. I want to move on to specifically fantasy performances as we're looking at the ranking sheets from the playing stage. Just a couple things to note. The top scoring players for each position. The number 1 overall scoring player was actually Breathe in the top lane from RNG. He scored 87.4 across the 5 games plus the best of 5 plus the point padding. So he was the top scoring player at 87.4. Just behind him, mid laner Zika from DRX at 87.22. He was incredible the whole weekend. Farmed really well. Was his Akali games really, like, the way he carried was incredible. The top scoring support was Ming from RNG. The top scoring jungler was Wei from RNG, 79.4. And in the bot lane, it was Gala at 86.6. He was the number 3 overall player. Any other people you want to call out from these rankings?
So, I mean, just taking a quick look at the rankings, there were some outside of the Korean and Chinese teams, which we'll talk about a little bit more as we get into the group picks. There's a couple players, again, outside of those that, did have good showing. So we had Upset on Fnatic. He might be somebody to watch as we get into the group stages. And then we have Impact also had a good showing again in this stage. Might be able to bring that momentum, as we spoke about earlier, over into the group stages. But I mean, there's a couple players here and there that, again, just going into the group stages, you want to take a good look at just what their value is as far as the pricing goes. Maybe you want to just take a look at the points that they scored in the playing stages and see if they might be able to fit whatever kind of team you're putting together during the group stages.
Yeah, not only that, but looking at some of the different positions and how they scored. So we talked about it. If you joined me when I joined the Ego app team for that podcast we did, the video podcast, Coach D-Man, he was talking about what the high scoring positions were going to be. He actually predicted it would be the top lane as the high scoring position. On average, he was wrong, but only by 1 point per game. And obviously the top scoring player was a top laner. And so, that's pretty different from the scoring formats we're used to, where top lane was almost the most useless. But with the scoring tweaks that favor top laners and junglers, suddenly top lane is super important. Bot lane was the highest scoring, and then pretty far behind that was mid lane and jungle, and then support not even close. The most useless, if you will. And so taking a look at that and using that to create your lineup going forward. And so if you're going to spend up on the top players, you're going to want that to be in the highest scoring positions.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, just taking another quick look here, it looks like mid lane of the 5 positions, it looks like it was the second lowest performing as far as average score for those players. So, when you're taking a look at some of the more expensive players going into group stages, yeah, they might be well-known names, but just from a fantasy perspective, they might not be the best fit just because of the amount of points that they, may not be able to get for your team. So it's definitely something to keep in mind moving forward.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Zika's performance as well is really bringing that number up. Because as I look at the mid laners, so the number 3 mid laner was Humanoid at 68.74. That would put him as the number 7 bot laner. And so it just really, bot laner is going to be the best bang for your buck going forward. A couple other players I want to shout out. I went hard for Cowrie and Shogun as 2 low-cost players during the playing stage. Both were okay. Cowrie was 69.9, which put him 6th, not too far behind anyone not named Gala. And then Shogun did not have a great showing. I really thought they'd beat the Mad Lions. If they would have done that, he'd have been awesome. But he didn't. I think his performance was good. His team just wasn't able to pull that out. And then I think that the best sleeper of the playing stage, I don't think it, I know it. It was El Yoya from Mad Lions. He scored 71.3, which is the second highest scoring jungler. It was higher than Pyosik from DRX. It was higher from Razork from Fnatic, who went 5-0. He was awesome. There's a reason. Well, I guess he wasn't the LEC MVP. He was second. Niski doing a great job, in my opinion, of enabling El Yoya, and El Yoya was awesome. It's a staple on the lineups that are in the top of the leaderboard right now. I want to move forward into talking about strategy for creating your group stage roster. And so obviously you're going to have to go through the Ego app. If you don't know what we're talking about, go sign up. Our link is on our Twitter. If you use our link, we'll get a little kickback. So do that. I also just wrote an article. I believe it will be live today, maybe tomorrow, definitely before the rosters lock. That's going to give you some strategies on creating your roster. And we're going to go over a lot of those here. I'm going to start first, and I want to talk about captains. So you can change your captain every night. So once the games end, you can then change your captain for the next day. And so what that means is you really need to pay attention to this schedule. And I know that's not one that you really think because it's around Robin, but the way that the group stage schedule works is that on the second week, each group stage plays a full round robin on each day. So on Thursday, only Group A will play. On Friday, it will be only Group B. Saturday, only Group C. Sunday, only Group D. So whatever. What that means is if you don't have a player playing on each day, then you're going to be losing a lot of points for the captain token. And so when you're putting your lineup together, you need to make sure you have a player in your lineup for every group. I think that's an incredibly important tip. Do you have any other tips you want to shout out here, Biscuit?
Yeah, no, just playing off of what you just mentioned, just paying attention to the groups and where your players are playing on their respective teams for that group. I think it's very, very important, especially considering you can change the captain every day, like you mentioned. You want to take advantage of that and try to maximize the points you can get. So definitely when putting your team together, obviously you want to look for the best value and the best players in the entire tournament, but maybe consider having a player play in each group, right? That way you can designate them as the captain for that specific day. And then obviously the next day you want to change it to that player that's playing for that team in that specific group that's, going on stage during that time. I think that's very, very important. I personally didn't know that going into it. Or maybe I, just skimmed over and missed it perhaps. But I think that's really good to point out for sure.
Yeah, and even in the first week of the group stage, you can do it not to the same extent, but you can look at matchups, right? And so if let's say you're heavy on, EDG players from Group A, but then they're playing SKT, maybe you're not going to put that player as captain. But then the next game, if they're playing, say, Fnatic, maybe that is the right call. So you really want to look at the schedules, try to put your captains on players with the best matchups.
Agreed.
Another thing I want to talk about, just in terms of strategy, is kind of knowing where you are in the rankings and tweaking your lineup accordingly. And what I mean by that is if you find yourself outside of maybe the top 50 or so at this point in the competition, you're going to have to take a risk because, I go over this in more depth in the article that will be posted today. But if you have the same players as everyone above you, you're never going to be able to jump them. And so you're going to have to take a risk. If you have a hunch on a player, you need to just follow it. I say on there that if you have a player who does well that's 25% owned, you're going to do well. But if you have a player that does well that's 3% owned, you're going to shoot up the leaderboard. So I think it's really important to be aware of where your ranking is and then take risks accordingly.
Yeah, definitely keep in mind that you can actually change your roster. I believe it's 2 times per stage when it comes to, again, putting your roster together. So if you lock in those first 5, realize, you need to take a risk in order to make up some of the points that you are, trying to, obviously, to make your way up the leaderboard. You can make some changes during the stage. And I think that's a good idea to keep in mind, right? If you find a player that's not necessarily owned by a lot of other players in the competition, you might want to consider picking them up just to try to leapfrog some of those people in front of you and just, try to make the best of the situation that you're currently in by, again, taking those risks and trying to make up some of those points.
Yeah, absolutely. And what I'm going to talk about next, I think, is the key to winning. This is the most important piece of information. It isn't in the article. No one else is talking about it. This is what's going to make you win. Use your sell tokens in the group stage. I'm serious. And so I realized this in an epiphany last night, which is the scoring for the best of 5s, they average it, right? So you're only getting 1 game's worth of points for the best of 5. With the way the schedule is on the second day of the group stages, if you use your sell tokens well, you'll be able to get more games, which obviously means more points. And so what I'm looking at is if I can get 2 players playing in Group A and then sell one of them for a player in Group B and then get 2 players playing in Group B, then you're actually getting more points. And so I think not only is that important to do then, but I think you need to plan for it now. And so use your sell tokens in the group stage. Then once you get to the knockout stage, I mean, it is true that there's a chance that you will miss points because players lose in the knockout stage. But the point of this is not to finish in the top half. It's not to finish in the top 100. It's to win. And the only way you're going to win is by taking a risk. This is a risk to use your group tokens in the group stage, but it's a risk that's absolutely worth taking because I think it's the only way to win. You have any thoughts on that?
No, I mean, I second that. Again, using the sell token is very, very important. I know I got to do a better job on my end of keeping track of selling players and picking up other players. But no, I mean, you obviously, it all comes down to maximizing those points, right? So the only way you can do that is if you take advantage of everything that somebody else might have missed, or maybe somebody's just not as inclined and knows how to use that. That's why you listen to podcasts like us. You read articles, whether it be from us or from others on the Evo app.
That's exactly right.
Yeah, exactly. So you always want to just read up and study up on any kind of advantages you can get. And, from there, you should be able to make your way up the leaderboard.
Yeah, and I was laying in bed and I shot out of bed and ran downstairs and went to my whiteboard, started writing things down. I've already got planned who I'm selling for who and exactly when. And if all goes well, I should get 6 extra games worth of play from my sell tokens, which I think is more than it's even possible to get once you're in the knockout stage. And so, yeah, definitely that's something to look at and strategize and be prepared for.
So is this like a Goodwill Hunting situation? Is that the correct movie I'm thinking of? Or am I way off bases here with the guys writing on the whiteboard?
I'm not familiar with the movie Goodwill Hunting. I hope we didn't lose any fans with that sentence. I hope we didn't. I mean, my goodness, what a classic that I've never seen.
The age is showing.
I know. I'm thinking more of like It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia you know, you got the lines from here to there. Are you familiar with that one?
Yes. Okay. I am familiar with that one.
God, I love that show. You're close to Philly. You should love that show too.
Yeah, no, it's a good show. Good show.
Absolutely. All right, I want to move forward to talking about specific players. So which players do we love? Which players are we considering putting in our lineups? First question, who's your favorite value pick? Your sleeper. Your player that doesn't cost a lot. And you're going to have some of those because the costs in this stage are really high. It makes it really hard to put a solid roster together. And so who's your favorite sleeper player?
So for my favorite sleeper player, I'm going to go with Zeus from T1. He is the top laner. I think they have a really good chance of coming out of groups, and I think they're going to perform really well. Right now, he is at $201. And just taking a quick look at some of the stats that I was able to put together, you know, that definitely ranks him up there amongst the top in the competition. But he's also one of the cheaper options at the position and just overall. If you do, you know, just quick math, you know, $200 per position, if on average is obviously what you have to spend. So the fact that he's just over that at 201 and projecting the amount of points that I think he's going to get, I think he's a really good value pick for the price that he's currently at.
Yeah, I don't mind that at all. And, you know, we talked about how important top lane is in this scoring format. And so definitely getting a strong top laner is very important. My favorite sleeper, and I've mentioned this in our last episode, but with the way the scoring is, the points from farming is really important. So one of the main things I was looking at when picking out my roster is who's farming well? Which players are teams feeding the resources to? And so with that in mind, the player who's tied for the highest amount of farm in the jungle position is actually Blabber from C9. And Blabber is not expensive. I don't have his cost written here. I believe it's about $160. And so puts you under that 200 line, allows you to spend somewhere else. I don't think he'll be the top scoring jungler. I don't think he'll be top 5, but I think he will do well. I think C9 has a decent chance. Last time we saw them playing in the LCS Championship in Chicago, they were incredible, and Blabber is such a fun player to watch, and they feed him resources. I hope we see him on some aggressive picks, some maybe Graves or his signature Olaf, but I think that Blabber is a player you can fit in your lineup that will do well and allow you to spend elsewhere. Do you have any players that you're specifically avoiding?
So I don't know if I'm like a bias just from taking a look at, you know, past years, worlds and whatnot, but I feel like basically any teams outside of the Korean and Chinese teams, I would probably try to avoid if I can help it. Especially the teams that are coming from other regions outside of like the major four, right? So in this case, I'd probably try to stay away from anybody on GAM Esports and Flying Oyster. Amazing name. You might just want to pick those players just because of the name and you can root for them as the underdog. But those would be the two teams of players that I would probably try to avoid at all costs. Definitely want to keep that in mind when you're putting together your lineup, because I just think those kind of teams are going to just get wiped throughout this stage. They'll be lucky if they pull out a game, I believe. So would definitely try to avoid those teams just in general.
Yeah, it's good advice, but it's hard to do because the prices on the Korean teams and the Chinese teams, for the most part, are really, really high. I mean, we see Faker at like almost 300. And so, you know, the Flying Oysters, the Gigabyte Marines, even 100 Thieves and EG, their prices are way lower. So if you can squeeze one into your lineup, it's going to allow you to spend elsewhere, but you do run the risk of really low scores. You know, each of those teams very easily could go 0-6. The player I'm avoiding, I actually just mentioned it. It's Faker. And I know he's the GOAT, and I know he's good, but the truth is that the team doesn't play around him that much anymore. Like they play a lot through Guma in the bot lane, and it shows in his CS per minute. It's not bad at 8.7 during the regular season in the summer, but it's just not really on par with the players that are below him in price. He's the most expensive mid laner. I believe it was 290. I don't have the number in front of me, but
I have 296 here. Yeah, definitely number one.
296. I mean, he's great, but they're not favored to win their group. That's EDG. He's not the best mid laner at this tournament. He's the GOAT. I'm not going to argue that, but I just don't think you can spend up for him. I think there's a couple players that are like that where, if you're spending 280, 290 on one player, you really have to reach to the bottom of the barrel in order to really fill out your lineup. I feel so dirty saying you have to avoid Faker. Like, gross.
I mean, definitely not something you want to do if your life was on the line, perhaps. But I mean, in this competition, definitely there are better options, like you mentioned, right? For the value, for sure.
Yeah, definitely. All right. This is the most important question. Who is your favorite player that you're putting in your lineup, regardless of price? He's going to carry you to victory. You'll make everything work around him. Who is that player for you?
So I think in this situation, I'm going to go with, it is going to be a player from Gen G, just because I feel like that is the easiest group and they are by far the best team from that group. As I continue to kill time and pull up this gentleman's name,
don't you dare pick my guy. Don't you dare pick my guy.
I'm going to go with Ruler in this case, just because I feel like, as we saw with the first stage, the bot lane definitely puts up the points in it. Obviously the top does well, but the bot lane definitely puts up points as well. He does have a higher price at 287, one of the highest in the competition. But I do feel like he is going to just continue to put up the points for sure in this group stage, and is a must, or at least a consideration for, at the very least, to have in your lineup at that position.
Yeah, Ruler is an incredible pick, but it's not my pick, and thank you for not taking it. I went very similar. I went with Chovy, who is the mid laner for Gen G, and let me tell you why. I think you're right in that their group seems to be pretty easy. Like, just looking at it, it seems really, really unlikely that either 100 Thieves or Flying Oyster take a game off of Gen G. Like, I just don't really see that happening. Maybe off of RNG, but RNG, as we saw, they looked a little shaky in the group stage, dropping the game to DFM, a couple bad early games. And so I love Chovy. I think, he's, if not he's one of the top 2 or 3 best mid laners in the world. But here's the thing that sealed it for me, and I've talked about it a couple of times, how important the CS per minute is for me. Chovy's at 10 CS per minute the whole split. Now, I know it's because they're winning a lot of games, but I expect them to continue to keep winning a lot of games. Chovy is at 10 CS per minute. The second best is 9.2. I mean, that is a massive gap. And so just the baseline for Chovy, I think, is so high. And then his peak is even higher. We saw what Zico was able to do when he was fed the resources for DRX. Zico is actually the second highest farming mid laner across the split. And so I think Chovy, I think the gap between him and the other mid laners is so big. I think Ruler will outscore Chovy, but I think there will be other bot laners that are closer. I think the gap between 1 and 2 in the mid lane is so big that I'm going to spend up for Chovy.
Yeah, I think that's a good pick as well. Just want to also keep in mind here, you'll notice that we're picking teams, not necessarily preferably, but just because we think they're going to be better teams in like the Korean and the Chinese teams, you do get additional points for objectives within the game and especially wins. So that is something to also factor in when picking your squad.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, not only will your players score better when they win because they get more kills and such, but you also literally get points for winning. So if you're not getting winning teams, you're gonna struggle.
Just leaving points on the table.
Well, that's pretty much it for what we had for previewing this group stage for your fantasy lineups. Last thing I want to do, I want to get predictions on who you think's making it through the group stage in your pick'ems. We don't need to go over it too much, but you want to just run down who your 8 teams are?
Yeah, so my 8 teams are, and I apologize to NA in advance. I'm going to go with Group A, I'm going Edward Gaming and T1. Group B, I'm going DWG Kia and JDG. Group C, I'm going DRX and Top Esports. And then Group D, I'm going Gen.G and RNG. So yes, I do have all Korean and Chinese teams. Do I feel like if there's any hope for either EU or NA? Maybe. I think it would only come within Group B and Group C. Perhaps maybe G2 or Rogue sneak through. If things fall their way, I don't necessarily see it happening, but I would also be surprised if one of those teams is able to squeak through.
Gosh, I hope your picks are wrong. That would be so boring. 4 Koreans and 4 Chinese teams? God, I really hope you're wrong. Here's what I got. I have, in Group A, I've got EDG and C9. There's the hope for NA.
Whoa.
T1.
I love it.
No, T1's not going to look so great. Group B, I've got JDG and Damwon, I have JDG and G2.
Okay.
Group C, Top Esports, and I really wanted to put the Gigabyte Marines because I love them almost as much as I love the Buffalo, but I can't do it. But they're going to win a game. They're going to shock people. But I'm going Top Esports and DRX. I think Rogue has a chance. I think Rogue has an outside chance. And then Group D, I think, is the easiest one. It's Gen.G, Giant Space, RNG, Giant Space, the other 2 teams. So I've got 1 NA,
I like
1
the picks.
I've got 1 NA, 1 EU.
Spicy. I mean, I do agree that it would probably be a little bit boring if it was all Korean and Chinese teams. I just feel like that's the strongest teams. I hope I'm wrong, just like you said. I definitely hope I'm wrong. But, I mean, if an NA team makes it through, the internet might collapse on itself. So I don't know if I want that either.
Yeah, C9 is always the hope for NA, so we'll pray for another episode of C9 making it through.
So before we close out here, do you feel like I know you picked Cloud9, right? Do you think Cloud9 is better than any of those teams in that group? Or are you just really hoping that they make it out? Because I personally don't think they're better than any of those teams. Maybe they're better than Fnatic, but what are your thoughts on that?
I think they looked a lot better than Fnatic in their playoff run, but Fnatic looked pretty good in the play-in stage, although they did drop a game to the minor region. I think that they're probably not better than SKT, but I think they're good enough to beat them in a best of 1. And so I think they're good enough to make it through. I don't think they're necessarily the second best team in that group, but I think they're good enough to finish second, if that makes sense.
No, that makes sense. I think that's good analysis.
All right, man. Anything else to add before we close?
No, it's good to be back. I hope we hear from at least some of you as we get into the group stages. You know, like we already mentioned, we'll be in the Discord chatting it up during the group play. Hope everybody's lineups turns out the way they want them to. And I guess, go NA. We'll see what happens.
That's right. Go NA. You'll catch me in New York City for the second week of group stage. We'll probably have an episode in between if we can make that work. But super excited for this week and for the whole tournament. I'm actually sitting in 5th place in this tournament, and so I'm so jacked about the remainder of it. So thanks so much, guys, for listening in. If you haven't, again, the Twitter, it's at LFL Pod. Join the Discord channel. Check out the articles and the tournament on the Ego app if you haven't yet. Those are all linked in the Twitter. Once again, this is Pistons Wish and Ferris Biscuit signing off. Peace out.
See ya.